All right, definitely some surprising news for the Indianapolis Colts. Two changes for them on their defensive staff. This is according to Joel A. Erickson of the Indianapolis Star. Obviously, Dustin Adams had it a little bit earlier as well, but Erickson confirms another person here that will not be renewed for the 2024 season for the Colts on their defensive coaching staff. Those two guys are first off defensive line coach Nate Ollie, and then defensive backs coach Mike Mitchell. Joined Gus Bradley in 2022 and was a part of that when the Colts decided to hire him. So the Indianapolis Colts decide to make this decision. And I guess instant reaction for me, I know for some people, obviously there's a lot of people who want Gus Bradley gone, saying, why'd you, get rid of him? He's the scapegoat. I think when I think about it, it makes sense for me because when you look at the Indianapolis Colts defensive line, I mean, yeah, okay, they broke the franchise record in sacks, so you look at that on the surface and you're like, how in the world can you justify, getting rid of a guy that had your unit playing at, really a franchise best when it came to getting after the quarterback? But then when you look a little bit deeper into some of the stats, specifically the stat that I think is the most telling for the Indianapolis Colts in the pass rush or lack thereof in the last couple of years with Nate Ollie. So right now, the Colts in 2023, they were actually 21st in the NFL when it came to getting after the quarterback and pressure rate, right? So, sacks can be a very overly inflated stat. We've seen it with different players in different situations. But the Indianapolis Colts, when you dive into some of the deep numbers, they're at the bottom half of the league when it comes to getting after the quarterback. And even in 2022, they were also, they were right around that same area. They were actually one worse in 22nd. Although I will say the one thing that you do see is that the pass rush rate did go up for the Indianapolis Colts. It still wasn't to the degree that it needed to be. Specifically, down the stretch, we've talked about this, when it mattered most, especially the last couple games of the season, that pass rush was virtually invisible. And when you really think about all that you've invested, if you're Chris Ballard and if you're the Indianapolis Colts, all that you've invested in terms of draft capital and also in, cap space, signing a guy like Samson Ebukam in the 2023 offseason. You drafted Kwity Paye, in the first round a couple years ago in 2021. You have Dio Adangbo. You have DeForest Buckner. It seems like you've continued to try to add to that unit. And while it definitely, I think, took a step forward from where it was in 2022, it still wasn't quite good enough. And I think maybe the reasoning for the Indianapolis Colts, when you think about it, is for all that you've invested into it to only get, 21st in the NFL in terms of pressure rate, that's just simply not good enough. That's just simply not going to win you games. And that's why I think we saw, especially with, Aiden O'Connell and CJ Stroud, they had all the time in the world, didn't they? They could find guys. And I know a lot of people want to point to the secondary coach and stuff like that. But I think it was more the lack of pass rush, the lack of, getting the quarterback off his timing, off his comfortability. The Colts, while they definitely had moments where they did that, I do think things like the stats were overinflated with some of the lack of competition that they were playing against, in terms of some of the teams they were playing against and certainly some of the quarterbacks that they were playing against. And again, you look at the 2024 gauntlet and you say, man, there's a lot of good quarterbacks the Colts are going to play. So if their pass rush plays like it did last year, it's not going to be pretty. It's really not going to be pretty. And for as much as you've invested into it, as much as you put towards it and kind of the result you've gotten or the lack of results you've gotten from this defensive line unit in terms of getting after the passer, I think it makes a lot of sense from the pressure rate and just the consistency when it comes, to getting after the quarterback and disrupting timing and making life a lot easier on the rest of your defense. And so, while it was a little bit of a surprise, it also makes a lot of sense when I do think about it a little bit more. So Nate Ollie out as defensive line coach for the Indianapolis Colts. So thoughts on Mitchell? This one's quite interesting because, you already have Ron Malice back there who's been coach for 20 plus years at this point. I do wonder how much of the, comments that Mitchell was making a little bit last year, factored into that. I mean, obviously the group was extremely young. This group of, young DBs the Colts had, but it definitely just felt like there was a lot of communication issue. There were just some definitely some things where you're just wondering, do you chalk that up to coaching staff? What's the deal? The secondary was definitely, a problem at times, no question about it. But a little bit of a surprise there for Mitchell. I think he's the least surprising of the two. Nate Ollie a little bit more surprising just because you look at what the Colts did in terms of the sack numbers and stuff like that. We'll see who are some guys they potentially look to fill that void. So let me know your guys' thoughts overall on these two moves, Nate Ollie, Mike Mitchell, not being renewed for the 2024 season on the defensive coaching staff. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. That'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much. And as always, go Colts.